put all the dirty linen out on the table, answer all the questions, and get this thing over with. Whatever is there, it's going to look a lot worse a month from now or a year from now than it does today. And I think the longer the president denies the American people the facts, the more he's going to subject himself to this situation where members of his staff, either at his direction or on their own, get perilously close to obstructing justice. And let's not forget, in this very city, not too long ago, a president turned a third.
Savages. Never were and we never will be.
We use the savages as a form of pride. We don't mean to demean the Indians.
It is a scene familiar for decades. As the Lamar Savages did battle on the court, their fans were on the warpath in the stands. But on this day, members of the American Indian movement were out to bring the use of such symbols to an end.
Bring about some change, possibly through a mandate to the state or for the state of Colorado, so that these kinds of derogatory names, symbols, characters would not be used anymore.
The list of such examples is as long as the traditions. For years, these names have rarely raised an eyebrow, but the definition of what is politically correct has changed. The issue certainly extends far beyond the reach of Colorado high school sports. The same questions can be raised about the names of many professional sports teams, including the Atlanta Braves, Kansas City Chiefs, Chicago Blackhawks, and of course, the Washington Redskins. What is the meaning to the Indian culture?
We think of the savage at Lamar High School as that of a noble savage, a very positive kind of an upright individual.
It really hurts, to have this picture, say of an Indian person depicted like that, looking very warlike and savage-like. Indian people are not like that.
The Savages won their game, but if the American Indian movement succeeds, the team could lose its name. Rick Salinger, News 4.
But it's not going to knock us down. We're going to continue to, and we appreciated the legislation and the governor's signature on that, but we're not going to stop it. We're going to continue and push for this federal legislation that much harder.
Bosnian Muslims and Croats continue to move closer to forming a united front. The two sides have agreed to merge their armies. A U.S. representative says that agreement could be a strong step toward peace. Well, even as Secretary of State Warren Christopher complained of maltreatment of Chinese dissidents, Chinese officials were continuing to crack down. Police surrounded the homes of the families of jailed dissidents and cut their telephone lines. Police want to keep them from contacting Christopher's entourage in Beijing. And for the first time in British history, women belonging to the country's largest church can now be priests. 32 women were ordained today in what is being touted as a new era of religious equality for the Church of England, the official church of Great Britain.
When Superior Police Chief Doyle Barker speaks to a college class, most students are not old enough to drink, and he likes it that way. Barker opposes a plan to lower the drinking age to 19.
Accidents with younger people getting in fights in the bars, people under the age of 19 trying to get into the bars. It'd just be a myriad of problems.
Bar owners say the 19 and 20-year-olds are already drinking, and the bill would just put them in a controlled setting.
Well, according to the state's own statistics, since we raised our drinking age to 21, we've had an 8-fold increase in liquor violations for people under the age of 21. That seems to be a substantial workload already. Let's legalize it. Let's get our kids out of the cars and in the bars.
The bill would not allow off-sale liquor, and it would control border hopping by not serving 19 and 20-year-olds from out of state. But the biggest motivation is financial. The state lost over $30 million in tax money when the age jumped to 21. Bar owners certainly lost more. The real test for this bill comes later this week. The Assembly leadership is trying to decide if it should even come up for a floor vote. The legislature is expected to adjourn on Friday. In Superior, Dave Jensch, News 6.
Yesterday morning we ran up on a ridge off of Eagle Harbor and sat there for about 2 hours while we worked our way free. Tried to use the bow propeller, and ice was so deep up in the bow that the bow propeller was jammed in the ice, so we know the ice was at least 10 feet deep.
It's the toughest anti-smoking measure the federal government has ever proposed. Restaurants and bars would have to ban smoking completely. No more designated smoking areas or smoking rooms in these establishments. And every other business in the country, no matter how small, would have to either ban smoking or provide a separate smoking room with its own ventilation system to the outside. Labor Secretary Robert Reich.
The proposed rule will protect the lives of millions of American workers without unduly burdening American employers.
The measure would cover 6 million places of employment, including all stores, offices, factories, schools, and healthcare facilities. The total ban at restaurants and bars is to protect waiters and waitresses. From smoking patrons today, shock.
I think it's too extreme. I think it's unfair.
I don't really approve of that. I think we should be able to smoke. It's pretty open here. We should be able to smoke in here.
As for those businesses which would have the option of installing special ventilation in smoking rooms, estimated first-year costs of the new ventilation equipment nationwide, $8 billion. The Building Owners Association today called that overly burdensome. And on Capitol Hill, another assault on cigarettes from Food and Drug Commissioner David Kessler, asking whether his agency ought to regulate them as a drug.
What concerns us is that the levels of nicotine in cigarettes is in excess of what's necessary to create and sustain an addiction.
Tobacco companies were reeling. Chief Executive of Lorillard, Alexander Spears.
This would be simply prohibition. And I think this country's been down that road one time, and if that is what's being proposed, they ought to say it rather than try to dress it up as something else.
But all these are only proposals. The restrictions on workplace smoking won't be final for another few years, and the Labor Department acknowledges that by then there could be some compromises. Robert Hager, NBC News, Washington.
Just a little younger, and their mother had them both down at the curling club skating, and they had these opaque tights. I could still see the two of them.
The reality is that it will be a smaller facility because there is a smaller fleet to maintain. Northwest had to cancel $7.5 billion of aircraft orders, including half of its planned Airbus fleet. So that means fewer aircraft, it means a smaller facility, but it means that they will still proceed with a plan.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Deborah. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here, Derek.
We're looking at particularly at Delta Airlines for your investigation. Can you tell me a little bit about their policy regarding weight for their flight attendants?
Well, Delta Airlines, like nearly every other airline today, has weight restrictions for its flight attendants. Most of the airlines have had some kind of complaints from their flight attendants. A couple of them, Northwest and Continental, have dropped them altogether. But Delta Airlines flight attendants, or a few of them, about 100, got together a little more than a year ago and said they've had it. They said that the weight restrictions are torturous, that in some cases they say that some of them have been driven to eating disorders, and many of them complain of feeling like they're being judged based on what the scale says versus based on their performance. So they are complaining now to the EEOC, basically asking for a suggestion that Delta get rid of these weight restrictions altogether.
Is it a case where they're entirely unreasonable? I mean, is it based on an archaic height-weight comparison chart, or is this something where they're looking at general guidelines of overall appearance?
Well, it's interesting. In our report, we take a look at three Delta flight attendants who are part of this complaint. And all of them, and you'll be interested to see that, you know, all of them, if you look at them, you would never ever say that these women are overweight. One of them is a size 8, one of them is a size 6, the other one is taller, maybe a little bit larger than that. But the interesting thing here is that these flight attendants say that they are not being judged based on some standard that seems fair. They complain that they have been suspended for being 1/4 of a pound overweight, 1/8 of a pound overweight. And the guidelines go something like this. One of the women in our report is over 40 years old. She's 5'2", and she weighs about 133 pounds. But the fact is, for Delta standards, she's fine now, but there was a time when she was considered a little too heavy for that. These flight attendants say that they're not talking about a standard that seems to be fair. They're talking about something that's archaic and that they feel subjects them to a standard that basically penalizes women based on how they look.
Are there any weight restrictions specifically for men, whether pilots or flight attendants on the airline in terms of their appearance?
Well, this is part of their complaint. Now, men flight attendants are subject to weight restrictions as well, but of course, men being men and heavier, the restrictions aren't quite the same as they are for women. But other than the flight attendants, the pilots are not weighed, the ticket agents are not weighed, and these flight attendants say, look, if you're going to weigh us, weigh everybody and make this thing fair. They contend that this is an antiquated way of looking at flight attendants as sort of the coffee, tea, or me image, and they feel that Delta is subjecting them to something that really is many decades old in its thinking.
Deborah Roberts in New York with Dateline NBC. We'll be watching your piece tonight.
Thank you, Derek.
Thanks for being with us.
Sure.
No, there's been a number of rumors, number of people have contacted us over the Hill Canal Park, many locations, and at this time we're just going to sit back and look at those options.
That there is still suffering and death that takes place in our world, in our town, in our country today. And so we make 14 different stops, the traditional 14 stations of the cross, at different areas that address or deal with suffering in a variety of ways.
Okay, let's go. There's a green one right here. You sure that's the color you want? Because you only have one. Okay. Okay. Let's go. Just grab your favorite color, George.
Just fun, you guys.
Come on, guys.